The god Anubis is one of the most recognizable deities in all of Egyptian mythology. Despite being a dark and grim deity, he is depicted with the body of a man and the head of a dog or jackal. And he was believed to be the guardian of the dead, guiding souls through the afterlife and protecting them from evil spirits. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel, where we bring you new videos every week on mythology, folklore, and religion. Today, we will be taking a deep dive into the origins, powers, and significance of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the underworld. So get ready to learn about the fascinating world of ancient Egyptian beliefs. If you enjoy this video, then please do like it and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our future uploads. Also, at the end of this video, we have more videos which we know you are going to love. As mentioned earlier, Anubis is one of the most famous gods in ancient Egypt. He was one of the oldest gods of the Egyptian pantheon, and his cult was widespread throughout Egypt during the entire period of ancient Egyptian civilization, from the earliest dynastic times until the rise of Christianity. But despite his popularity, there is surprisingly little known about him. His name, Anubis, is thought to mean something along the lines of he who is on the bark, which refers to his role as a guide of the dead. And he was associated with a number of important concepts related to death and the afterlife. Anubis was primarily responsible for preserving the bodies of the dead, both human and animal. As such, mummies were often dedicated to him and buried with offerings of food and other goods. He was also believed to be the protector of graveyards and was invoked to keep evil spirits away from the dead. Additionally, Anubis played a key role in the judgment of the dead in the afterlife. According to Egyptian beliefs, the soul of the deceased would be weighed against the feather of justice during the ceremony known as the ceremony of the balance. The feather represented truth, and the just person whose heart had not sinned would be granted passage to the field of reeds, a paradise-like afterlife. However, if the deceased was found to be guilty of serious sins, their heart would be eaten by the goddess Ammit, who is said to dwell in the underworld. While Anubis was not solely responsible for judging the dead, his role was an important one, and he was seen as a key figure in determining the fate of the soul. Anubis was typically depicted with the body of a man and the head of a jackal or dog. This may seem like an odd combination, but it was actually quite common in Egyptian mythology for gods to have animal heads. It was believed that this allowed them to communicate with the animal kingdom and use their abilities to help humans. In fact, many Egyptian gods had animal associations, such as Bastet, who had the head of a cat, and Sobek, who had the head of a crocodile. The jackal imagery associated with Anubis likely stemmed from the animal's scavenging habits. Jackals were known to scavenge on the carcasses of dead animals, and this may have led the Egyptians to associate them with death and the afterlife. Additionally, jackals were also known for their intelligence and cunning, which were seen as desirable traits for a god who was responsible for guiding the dead through the underworld. Despite his association with death, Anubis was not seen as a malevolent deity. In fact, he was considered to be a helpful and benevolent god who assisted the dead on their journey to the afterlife. He was believed to guide the soul of the deceased from the moment they died, embalming the body and leading the funeral procession. He was also present during the ceremony of the balance and was said to assist the dead in any way necessary to ensure their successful passage to the afterlife. One of the most famous depictions of Anubis can be found in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a collection of funerary texts that were used in the burial rituals of the ancient Egyptians. In one particular text, Anubis is shown guiding the deceased king Osiris through the underworld. The text describes how Anubis leads Osiris to various obstacles and challenges that he must overcome in order to reach the field of reeds. These challenges represent the trials that the soul must endure in order to reach the afterlife, and Anubis is there to help the deceased navigate them successfully. In addition to his role in the afterlife, Anubis was also believed to have some power over the living. He was sometimes called upon to protect travelers and to help them find their way. And he was also believed to be able to cure certain illnesses and to protect people from evil spirits. While his primary role was as a guide of the dead, his abilities extended beyond the realm of the afterlife. It is important to note that the ancient Egyptians did not view death as a negative event. Instead, they saw it as a transition to another realm of existence, and they believed that the afterlife was a place of peace and happiness. In fact, they went to great lengths to preserve the bodies of their dead and to ensure that they were buried with all the possessions they would need for their journey to the afterlife. They believed that this would ensure the safe passage of the soul and its comfortable existence in the afterlife. Overall, the ancient Egyptians had a very complex and nuanced view of death and the afterlife, and Anubis was a key figure in their beliefs. His role as a guide, protector, and judge of the dead was seen as essential to the smooth transition of the soul to the afterlife. And his image was revered throughout Egypt for centuries. Ancient Egyptian mythology is rich with symbolism and hidden meanings. And one of the most intriguing aspects of Anubis is his connection to the desert. The vast, dry, and desolate landscape of the Egyptian desert was seen as a metaphor for the journey of the soul after death. And Anubis, with his jackal form, was seen as the perfect embodiment of this journey. The jackal, like the desert, was harsh and unforgiving, but also resilient and enduring. This symbolism is reflected in many of the stories and myths that feature Anubis, as well as in the artwork that depicts him. Another interesting aspect of Anubis is his association with the moon. The Egyptians believed that the moon, like the soul, went through cycles of death and rebirth. As the moon waxed and waned, it seemed to die and be reborn over and over again. And this cycle was seen as a reflection of the journey of the soul through the underworld and into the afterlife. This association is particularly evident in one myth in which Anubis is said to have been born from the moon god Honsu. It is also worth noting that Anubis was one of the few gods in the Egyptian pantheon who was not anthropomorphic. He was usually depicted with the body of a man and the head of a jackal, which was seen as a more realistic and therefore more authentic representation of the divine. This is in contrast to many of the other gods who were depicted in purely human form, even though they were often associated with animals. Finally, it is important to remember that Anubis was not the only deity associated with death and the afterlife in ancient Egypt. There were several other gods and goddesses who played a role in this process, including Osiris, who was the god of the underworld, and the dead, and Isis, who was the goddess of magic and witchcraft and was often called upon to help the dead on their journey. Anubis, however, remained one of the most prominent and popular figures in the Egyptian underworld, and his legacy continues to fascinate us today. Anubis has left an everlasting impression on art, literature, and culture. His image has been used in everything from tattoos to video games to heavy metal bands. In modern times, Anubis is often seen as a symbol of death and the supernatural, but he can also represent guidance, protection, and the transition to a new phase of life. Whether you see him as a grim reaper or a helpful guide, there's no denying that Anubis is one of the most fascinating figures in ancient mythology. If you enjoyed this video, then check out the next videos we have for you.